Do it live! F*** it!
Hey, what's going on, man?
There he is, the man of the Dabbleverse Hour. After the last few weeks, but you're a very popular man lately.
Well, it's been kind of a public relations blitz, but I can feel my 15 minutes slowly expiring.
Yeah, it definitely is because you're here with me right now. So
no, that's not how I meant it. This is the pinnacle. This is the culmination.
I would think so. I definitely think so. I'm no Carl from WATP. You're definitely going down as far as audience size goes. But
it doesn't get much smaller than my audience.
Well, yours is definitely on the up and up. Let me ask you about how would you describe the Dabbleverse to someone who's might be watching right now who's never heard of it?
I've tried to describe it before. Essentially, it's a constellation of podcasts that all orbit Stuttering John Melendez, a personality formerly of the Howard Stern Show, because for whatever reason, he is eminently fun to poke fun at. So a cottage industry has arisen whereby various podcasts do other things, but primarily make fun of him, and his reactions to them making fun of him help spur that engine on and keep it running.
Yeah, and it has been running for a couple of years now, at least.
Yeah, I think I heard Carl say that he did his first episode of Who Are These Podcasts that was on John. I'm not saying the first episode of his show, but the first time he did a show on John was maybe even as much as 4.5 years ago. It was a while ago. He said he did his show on John's podcast because that's what he does, is talk about terrible podcasts. And then he moved on. And it was only when John had an absolute hissy fit about it and started threatening to sue and threatening to come after him and try to get his Patreon taken down and all this stuff that it spurred Carl to do more shows about him. And then Shuli Egar, formerly of the Howard Stern Show, left Stern, and that freed him up to finally respond to John because John had been taking shots at him for a while at that point. And so he started the Uncle Rico Show, and he was on with Carl before he started his own show, I think. And so the two of them kind of helped get each other more attention in the realm of looking at John and making fun of him. Yeah. There was some synchronicity there. And that was the genesis of this industry that is making fun of one late 50s guy who was on a radio show 30 years ago.
Yeah. And a lot of that he brings on himself. But before we get to that and Stuttering John, I'm just being a Howard Stern. I think everyone in this Dabbleverse, or sometimes it's referred to as lately the Hackverse, but the two and two are pretty synonymous. But it really, I feel like everyone in this community, if we want to call it that, is either a super fan of Howard Stern or Opie and Anthony or radio in general, and that's how we have all kind of arrived at it.
Well, I think so to some extent, but I think it has a life of its own. One of the guys that was listening to my live stream this evening said he was in Egypt, of all places. How a guy in Egypt, who's probably not my age, he's probably younger, how he even hears about a Howard Stern or any of the personalities associated with that show is a mystery to me. So I think at the core of this audience are people who remember that era, people who grew up listening to Stern on the radio. I listen to Stern. I listen to Opie and Anthony. I listen to Rover's Morning Glory, which has this weird intersection with this universe. And, I used to commute to a job an hour and a half one way. So I spent 3 hours every day on the road. I needed a constant supply of talk radio to keep me going so I wasn't bored out of my mind. But there's a younger generation of people, like when Little Mir and Mega G interviewed Stuttering John. These guys are way too young to have ever had anything to do with that universe.
Yeah,
they've come to it later from the internet. So it's fascinating to watch successive younger generations find this universe and poke at these old men when they have no idea of their genesis, and they don't need to know. They don't need to have listened to Howard Stern back when the stuff he did on the radio was absolutely scandalous.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's the power of YouTube, I guess you would say, is I do like the fact that Lil Mir and these younger guys are here doing this podcasting and fans of that show. Even though we grew up on it when it was happening live, they can still go back and relive it. And obviously what attracts them to it is the same thing that attracted us to it. I think there's definitely a demographic of men that are older like us that grew up on radio, that didn't have the internet. So radio is everything, radio and TV, but especially in your car, I've heard you mention Rush Limbaugh before, and same here. There was something about hearing one person talk that I could just listen to and retain the information. Stern, who else? There was another one I was thinking about, or I thought I saw you on your show earlier today talking about Savage.
Michael Savage, G. Gordon Liddy.
Yeah, I remember that. Listen to that too.
There were so many back in the day.
Art Bell. I mean, from morning to all night. It was.
Oh yeah. We all knew that one weird kid who would stay up all night listening to radio shows overnight, like Art Bell.
Yeah.
I knew this kid in like grade school who would take caffeine pills and stay up at night and listen to the forbidden radio shows, and he thought he was so cool.
Yeah. I was a art student, so in college I would pull all nighters and do projects and just listen to Art Bell. Art Bell for me is definitely an influence. Stern is definitely an influence, probably my biggest. But like Lil Mir and those guys, I never discovered Opie and Anthony until a few years ago, because he was never really syndicated here. And when I had Sirius, I was just listening to Stern all the time. So
yeah.
But Opie and Anthony, I discovered them a little bit later, and very, very funny. Not so much now, especially Opie. I'm not a big fan. Are you a fan of Opie?
Well,
I saw you tweeting about him earlier today.
No, I was giving him grief. I mean, Opie was never the funny guy. He was always the straight man on the show. And he was good at being the administrator of that show. But over time, and I've heard Anthony talk about this, and I've listened to some of the broadcasts he's done where he talked about the deterioration of their relationship. Like, over time, they genuinely grew to dislike each other. Yeah. And Anthony's of the opinion that it's because Greg expected them to be friends outside of the show, but they in fact didn't have a lot in common as people. They're very different types of people. And so when Anthony managed to get himself in trouble and get fired, Greg didn't go to bat for him because he saw it as a chance to finally get out from under this guy and do his own thing. The problem is that Greg Opie Hughes himself is not a draw. He's not interesting. And, the mediocre attempts at broadcasting online that he's done since are a testament to that fact. I'm not trying to insult the guy. He's just not that interesting.
No, I agree. And that's the thing about him and John, back to Stuttering John. It's like you cannot criticize him for anything. I've done some Dabbleverse videos. It's not everything I do, but I make sure to give people credit. I give John a ton of credit. I give Shuli a ton of credit. I might not like him all the time, but I do give him a ton of credit. But if you say one little thing, forget all that good stuff you said about him, you are automatically a troll or a hater.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely two approaches in this constellation of podcasts. There are people who understand that giving each other grief and even insulting people is not that big a deal. And then some people take that to an extreme, like Vince the lawyer will go on your show and insult you even as he's saying nice things about you, and expect you to be okay with all of it. And then there's people who treat this like it's 4th and 5th grade. And, well, you went on the show of someone I don't like, and you said mean things about me, and we're not best friends anymore. Yeah. And John himself constantly talking about friends, best friends. He was saying to DG, we're going to be best friends forever, you and me. And it was just so cringeworthy.
Really?
You're a grown man. You're almost 60 years old. You should not be interacting with human beings in this way. And yet he does.
Yeah, he does. He is a definition of insanity. Everyone's his best friend. Anyone who gives him a remote amount of attention, friends for life until the next day, when they...
Well, and I watched, there was one show in particular when DG was acting as his co-host.
Yeah.
DG was trying to agree with him hard enough to stay in John's good graces, and it was not possible. John got it into his head that DG was disagreeing, and DG's like, no, I'm agreeing with you. But because John didn't understand something that they were talking about, he assumed it was disagreement, and DG could not grovel hard and fast enough to get out from under his ire.
Oh man, that's a great thing. A misunderstanding. I think I've seen John Stuttering John Melendez is a case study in so many different things. I mean, you can go down so many different. That's why he's so fascinating. But he's not he doesn't realize he's not fascinating for the reasons we're fascinated with him. And
he'll go through this litany, this chant he does, where he talks about everything he's ever accomplished in life, as if he's trying to convince himself that he's good enough and accomplished enough, and gosh darn it, people like him. And he just doesn't, if you have to convince me this hard, it's weird that someone this successful is so unhappy all the time.
Yeah. And yeah. Oh God, I know it's absolutely bonkers, but I think, and this is where we'll probably disagree, because I've had this discussion with El Horrible and some other folks. I think he's completely delusional. Like, I think when he looks in the mirror, he sees what he thinks he is, which is great at anything.
No, I agree with you. I believe he does buy that. I know that Carl at Who Are These Podcasts thinks that maybe it's all a gigantic scam and that John is in on it, but I don't think so. I think he would have to be the most brilliant actor who ever lived to pull that off. Like he's going to get to the end of his life and suddenly start speaking the Queen's English. Be like, I must tell you, it was all a scam. Tell the people. So,
like Kevin Spacey at the end of The Usual Suspects movie,
right? Like he suddenly loses his limp, and he's like, "It was me the whole time." But he managed to get himself into huge trouble today. There's some talk about that his channel might be suspended because he was doing his live stream, and I tuned in for part of it. I especially always tune in for the beginning, which is what I call the running of the grievances. It's like the running of the bulls in Pamplona. Every beginning of every live stream for John is when he tells you who he hates today. Okay. So I'm listening, and I was on a delay because I'd had to pause the audio. And he was interviewing Joey C. at some point. Joey was in his car, and they were yelling back and forth. And then all of a sudden, the feed went dead. And I didn't think anything of it because John does stuff like that all the time. Come to find out, I found out later while watching Shuli's network, he was on with someone he thought was the guy who calls himself Dabblestorian, but the person who came on was he was an imposter who had the link because I think he gave a link to Patrick Melton and Melton tweeted it out. The guy who came on was an Australian fellow, or at least doing an Australian accent, sounded almost nothing like Dabblestorian, but John was buying it. And then suddenly he pushes a button and there's porn on John's screen. I think he leapt back like he'd been burned in a fire, and he deleted that stream. It's still up on Facebook, or it was as of a couple hours ago. But I don't know how this works. I would have thought if nobody reported it, as long as you deleted it, you'd be okay. But now there's talk that maybe his stream got suspended. So I don't know the answer. And I haven't seen him tweet about it. I looked at his Twitter feed to see if maybe he'd complained that, that the nose player got my channel pulled down or something like that. Weirdly, the folks on the Uncle Rico show, when they got this news while they were on the air, rather than pulling out the party favors and gleefully celebrating the downing of his channel, the way John has done explicitly, they were like, well, how do we get him back on earlier? So, and I'm not saying that this is not some great and wonderful virtue on their part. It's completely self-serving. If John is able to make content, it's better for them. So, I think we can all agree that we'd rather have him able to broadcast than not able to broadcast.
Yeah, it was interesting watching the last year unfold because John was there and then he disappeared for several months. And
like 8.
Came back, And I think it's, at first when he came back, I think he had about a week there, where he was on MLC getting paid $3,000. That first week he was raking the money, but he got tired quick.
Well, it fell down a well within a couple of days. Yeah. He got $3,000 to go on with Kevin. And then right after that, I think Chad paid him like $500. And by the end of 2 or 3 days, he was begging Opie to come on if he'd just Venmo him money for beer. So he went from like $3,000 to $20 pretty fast.
Yeah. It's like, do you think everyone, I've noticed there's a lot of dime store psychologists like myself and that love to try to diagnose what's going on with him. It ranges from people saying he's a narcissist. That's common. To delusion, to ego, to all these different things. But I noticed when people analyze him, like, to me, I think he's misunderstood more than anything else. I think he comes across as narcissism, but I think a lot of the times he's just on a different page and he's not understanding what's going on, and he's reacting to a misunderstanding. Does that make sense?
It does. I tend to think of John as an 8 to 12-year-old child. If he was 8 to 12 years old, everything he says and does would make perfect sense. How a man gets to be almost 60 years old, but behaves in that way, especially when he's interacting with his mother, I don't know. But if you just close your eyes and picture him as 12 years old, like he's in the 5th grade or so, It makes perfect sense.
That you're right. Maybe we all do that a little bit in his credit when our mom's around. Maybe we do kind of like turn into.
I would like to hope. I don't know. Like his mom is in a lot of his live streams. God bless her. She seems very supportive.
She reminds me of my mother. Mine's Italian. I have an Italian mom, but she reminds me of my mother. Yeah,
because I know my mom. She wouldn't understand a blessed thing that was going on, but she'd be happy if I was happy. Like, I don't understand why you called that guy an asshole, but I bet he was.
He is just fascinating to me. I said this in another interview. It's a bad place to be when you're being laughed at and you're making content that's not making you money, that you're being laughed at and trolled, and other people are making you funnier by taking your clips. Like he's not funny when you watch a show. To me, his whole show is awful.
Oh, unwatchable. I can't imagine hating myself enough to want to watch John talk about left-wing politics, because it's not just that his opinions aren't, I'm a right-winger, he's a left-winger, so already I wouldn't like his opinions, but he doesn't understand the opinions he's espousing. He's just repeating half-remembered, mostly misunderstood things that he's, been reported to from CNN. Like, well, they said I should be mad about this, so I'm going to tweet about how much I hate Donald Trump's kids.
Yes.
It's just painful.
I think the pinnacle of painfulness when it comes to this is when Alex Stein, I guess Alex Stein was on John's show, or John was on Alex Stein's show.
Oh, yes.
Having a quote unquote debate.
Yeah. Well, I dislike Alex Stein intensely. I find him exceptionally annoying. There's something really, really wrong with that guy. And
I'm not a fan either.
So putting them on the same screen, arguing back and forth with each other, and Alex is doing that weird, high-pitched, hyperactive voice that he does, and John is getting mad because he doesn't understand anything that's happening. Like, Stein is intelligent, I'll give him that, and he does understand the issues. But everything, like, I feel like if I was trapped in an elevator with Alex Stein, I would have to choke him unconscious to get a moment's peace.
I'm already turned off with the topsider shoes with no socks. I'm out. That's it for me. Like, I don't need. What is that? That frat boy.
I will say this. I want to say that I saw Alex Stein. I think it was a video with him in it where somebody threw a shoe at him, so he threw their shoe on the roof and was like, "There, now you don't have a shoe," and that I enjoyed.
Yeah, he's done some funny things, but as far as that moment, like, John is just typical in that there's no logic, or like you were saying before, the CNN talking points. There's nothing logical coming out of that brain of his.
No, it's just hatred.
Yeah,
he just hates right wingers.
Zero substance. I mean, it's one. I don't. That's fine, but give me a logical argument. Let me give me some logic. He has zero logic, and
his opinions
had logic, and he made John look stupid. But at the end of it, John swore up and down. He just rolled over Stein. It was like you didn't even say anything. You know
what John loves to do is just declare victory, no matter what happens. I win again.
Is it though? I think he believes he did.
He was running through a litany of illogical and specious conclusions one day. And he's like, well, you see, the dues payer is wrong because this, which made no sense. And this, so I win again there. And this, which also made no sense. So that's like 5 or 6 things that I won just right then and there. And no, it's not. But obviously he doesn't care. He just wants to declare victory. So.
He is just unbelievable. I can't even put it into words like what I watch every day. It's like you can't write this stuff, as they say. Every time he turns on his mic in the video, he gives his enemies so much ammo just by opening his mouth. It's just amazing. He cannot possibly he's just terrible at it.
Well, that's what it is. John desperately wants to be and do certain things, but he lacks the component talents to be and do those things. And so he sets himself up to fail. You know, for example, in the past, he has tried to roast Carl and Shuli back, which makes sense. If they're making money making fun of me, I could make fun of them and I should be able to make money too. The problem is that because he has no sense of humor about himself, because he's motivated by resentment and anger and hatred, it doesn't come across as funny in any way, and therefore it's not entertaining. People's bitter recriminations generally aren't funny. George Carlin, towards the end of his life, was just really pissed off at everything. And that's not funny anymore. And he wasn't funny anymore because he was so bitter. So John, his political takes are all rooted in hatred of people who disagree with him. And it's compounded by the fact that he doesn't really seem to believe the party line that he is espousing. It's almost like somebody told him that if you want to get ahead in life, you have to be a left-winger. So that's what he did, despite his long history of political incorrectness, which doesn't matter anymore because it was so long ago, according to him.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's the most painful thing about his political show. He's such a virtue signaler.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing worse to me than virtue signalers.
Well, hypocritical
hypocrisy.
Yeah. The last thing this guy should be policing is hypocrisy, because he's full of it himself.
But that's common in the Dabbleverse. Everyone's hypocritical in the Dabbleverse.
Well, human beings are hypocritical by nature because it's very hard to be consistent in all things. But John himself, massive hypocrite, like more so than the average person. So,
yeah, he is, and that has a lot to do with his everything, his makeup, his past, his fame. He did have a lot of fame, through the Stern shows. I mean, he's like, and I always want to give him credit, despite whether people think he fell forward or
failed upward.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the height of his hour, let's say, he was making like $500,000 a year, and he was the announcer for the Tonight Show. A guy who stutters is the announcer for a national television show. That's impressive. The problem is that this was all decades ago, and he still acts like he's an A-list celebrity today. He was only ever a B-lister at best.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like we all have a certain amount of street cred, so to speak, but there's a time when that starts to wear off. It's like, okay, we're here now, So let's say, like Chad Zumock the other day when the Quadfather was on MLC, he's like, "Who is this Quadfather guy? What is he doing here?" It's like, I hate to tell you, you're really not much better than him in whatever you think this is. I mean,
well, that was a fascinating I watched that interaction. I almost never watched Kevin Brennan, but I tuned in just because he had Chad on at that moment, and Chad had been talking about me because it was talking about my appearance on WATP. So I had Chad on the mind at that moment. And I tuned in, and the Quadfather was absolutely stabbing him over and over again. Just zing, zing. And Chad, you could watch him downshift through all the defensive techniques in his repertoire that don't involve actually witty rejoinders. They were all just like rhetorical methods. So the guy was trying to talk, and Chad would be like, yeah, what's next? What's next? What else you got? Well, it's not really a response. It's just a way of deflecting. And so to see him like run through his entire gamut of defensive methods was pretty impressive, because that Quadfather was giving him a hard time.
Well, the Quadfather is experienced in this. I mean, he does the BYB podcast, 2-3 nights a week. It's not like he just started doing this yesterday. He's earned a spot to be where he was the other day, and it's like John's retorts. Chad is supposed to be the funny one in the comic, and he's up there telling, this guy's not funny. Yeah, nice try, blah, 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 you're bombing, whatever. And yet, Chad never says anything funny for the most part, I mean, he's as delusional as everyone else.
The most funny Chad ever was when they got him to agree to prank John by putting up the fake Venmos, because I think the people who don't like Shuli and don't like Uncle Rico, I think they missed the point of that prank, which was John has his hands in everyone else's wallets all the time. And he was losing his mind at the thought that the person on screen with him was getting money that he was not. Yeah. It was driving him up a wall. It was a masterful prank. It really was.
It was good.
As somebody pointed out, I think it was on my stream earlier today, John can't trust anyone, and I don't blame him, because he's been pranked so many times. Anyone who interacts with him could be trying to prank him, and he's not able to tell.
This is his fault, though, because he can't carry a show on his own. That's the problem. He needs somebody. He needs other people. It's almost like Chad in a way as well. These guys aren't as witty. Kevin Brennan, to me, is witty. I mean, I know people hate him and stuff like that. Melton is witty. I know people hate him too. I mean, you're gonna have fans, and you're gonna have people that don't like you, but they just lack the speed and the quickness to make quick jokes, to react, to adapt. Well, they're asking people, you have any ideas for content? It's like, you are the content creator.
Right. Well, when a Kevin Brennan or a Patrick Melton takes a piece of content and comments on it, there's something there. There's value added there when they do it. I watched Melton analyze a video of Aaron and April Imholt, and he was talking, they were fighting on air, and he was analyzing it. And it was fascinating listening to him take that apart. Yeah. And he's got his downsides too, because when a guy does like a 7-hour stream, there's no chance I'm tuning in for that. But when you excerpt a portion of it, and it happens to be this discussion, that I'm interested, then I'm on board. Yeah. But Chad and John, when they watch something, they'll just sit there staring at the screen and occasionally go, oh, yeah, this guy, look at this guy wearing his hat. And that's not value added. You're not doing any commentary. You're just yelling at the video for existing.
They're bad at everything they do.
Well, and I don't understand how a petty criminal like Chad has the persistence that he's shown. This is a guy who's failed at everything in life, but also has a criminal record to show for it. Credit card theft and, cracking up cars and losing his jobs over it, and stalking and just, the guy has issues. So I don't get how he remains a persistent figure in this universe, because he's genuinely a little scary.
I think that I'm willing to, give people second chances and stuff like that. As far as, he touched radio. He's been around for a little while. He's been on stages. I'll give him some credit too, much like I give John credit. But I think the problem is with both those guys is they are their own worst enemies in everything they do. Every relationship, every podcast they put on, the reason people are making fun of them and trolling them, it's all starts with them, and they never see that.
No, and I think that goes back to the fact that they don't have a sense of humor about themselves. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself, and I don't think that's something either one of them can do.
That's bingo. If I had a sound effect, I would ring the bell or something. That's it. One thing I wanted to bring up about John, which segues into this really nicely about they're their own worst enemies, is John's all about don't troll, don't talk about my kids, don't talk about my family, whatever. Okay. But John is the one on Twitter posting pictures of his kids.
Well, not only that, but he talks about the families of his enemies plenty. Matter of fact, he was on one of the Reddits, and he knew there was a picture of Shuli's family, and he tried to pretend like he didn't know, and he scrolled right up and he left it on the screen. It's like, we all know what you're doing. You're not fooling anybody with these grade school level deflections.
Right.
Because since he feels wronged, he feels it's okay for him to do absolutely anything in retaliation. And so he doesn't understand that there's a difference between Uncle Rico making a couple of jokes about his adult children and him showing or threatening to show information about and pictures of minor children belonging to Shuli. Like, there's a big difference there. If someone puts up a YouTube video and your minor child is in that video, there's a specific reporting field in YouTube for that issue. That they take that very seriously.
Yeah, they do. And I guess my point, it really came to a head when I really thought about this Twitter stuff, because he's tweeted pictures in the past of his kids, but lately, like he apparently a couple of weeks ago, he has a new girlfriend or whatever, and she has apparently 2 underage kids. So if I'm wrong, I apologize. What I remember is seeing the picture of John, his person he's dating, and her 2 kids. And I'm thinking, you idiot. Why would you tweet that picture? Now, do you know if he tweeted that picture? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, he tweeted it.
Okay.
And then right after that, any discussion of this woman and her children completely evaporated. The speculation seems to be that she was not okay with him tweeting that picture out. Or maybe it simply became a moot issue because, like, they met his kid. He specifically went to meet her children and hang out with them, which is like the next stage in a relationship. And then nothing came of that. So, there was a while ago that he had a different woman in the background of a video. Yeah. So I think it's the case that this guy is dating and trying to find someone. And I also think he's not meeting with success. I don't think there is a steady girlfriend in his life, and there has not been.
Once again, he's his own worst enemy. You don't, especially when you're a Stuttering John. You
do have to be careful what you tweet out.
Have you ever heard of Facebook private? Like, that's why I do not excuse it. He should be protecting his girlfriend or the person he's dating, and he should be protecting those kids. He's thinking about himself. He's thinking about his image. He's thinking about his Twitter. There is no reason he should be tweeting any pictures of any relationships, blood or not, on Twitter. Keep it to Facebook. Keep it to your friends and your family, and keep it private. He has no reason to say anything about anyone commenting on that picture. He shouldn't have put it on Twitter to begin with. And you're an idiot for doing it.
I've seen that before. Over the years, I've gotten into various spats with people online, and every once in a while, someone will come at me and attack me and be really vicious about it. And if I go over to their social media, I'll see them posting pictures of their children. And I'm like, Look, man, I'm not a psychopath, so you're not going to get any problems from me. But point of order, you can either start wars with strangers on the internet, or you can post pictures of your children. You can't do both.
You can't have it both ways. You make a private person a public person with one click of a button that they didn't even want to be public. It just shows the mindset. It's all about him. And I'm, there's a debate, does Shuli go too far? Does Carl go too far? All that stuff. But
I think on the whole, I think the jokes that Shuli and Carl tell about John come from a place of humorousness and from a place of, look, John is putting this out there and we are mocking what he is putting out publicly. Mm-hmm. I don't get the sense that what they're doing is mean-spirited. There is, however, a blurring of that line when John comes at them and uses underhanded tactics in an attempt to destroy them in a way that is dishonest. When John lies about, well, I'm disabled, so you can't criticize me because you're picking on the handicapped, that's dishonest. And then when he tries to deplatform people, or he crows about going after Shuli sponsors, or he smugly celebrates because the Shuli network was down for a few days because the YouTube algorithm misinterpreted something in one of their videos as animal cruelty because there was a rooster at the beginning of their video intro. It makes it very hard to sympathize with him because he approaches everything from a place of absolute mean-spirited, I will destroy you. And I think his critics on the whole come from a place of laughter.
I think Shuli's a little bit more vicious, but I've also said in my past videos that Shuli owes John for that because...
Well, yeah, they have a history. And, when Shuli first started coming at Stuttering John, it was because John had been trying his best to hurt Shuli for a long time. Essentially trying to get him fired. So I don't blame him for that resentment at all. And honestly, at some point, both Carl and Shuli realized there's gold in them our stutterings because, it became an industry unto itself. We make fun of John and we get attention. I started talking about Stuttering John on my channel for only one reason, and that is I was so annoyed at seeing the things he said while I was consuming this as entertainment that I'm like, I have to say something. So I put up the video and then I put up a couple more, and that's the only reason my channel got noticed. I went from, a pitiful 250 subscribers 2 weeks ago to a slightly less pitiful 1,000 subscribers today.
Yeah.
And it's only because I hit on a topic that other people are interested in. And sadly for all of us, that topic is Stuttering John Melendez.
Well, Phil, let me give you a little bit of credit. And by the way, I probably need to do a better job of plugging all your stuff's in the description. But I saw your rise to fame in the Dabbleverse, and I saw you early on. I'm an OG Phil Elmore subscriber. But I'll be honest, I think the first video I saw was a steel toe video. I'm like, okay, that's interesting because I've interviewed Aaron from Steel Toe on his channel. He was like number 4, I think, and you're number 12. I know people, I know you're not a fan. That's cool. I'll just say this, out of all the people I've dealt with behind the scenes, he's one of the coolest.
That actually doesn't surprise me because this is a guy who has a little bit of experience in like entertainment as a medium. Mm-hmm. So I would expect him behind the scenes to kind of get it. Yeah. And I realize a lot of what happens in front of the camera is a persona. I still find some of the things he's done and said unlikable, but I don't, I don't hate any of these people. Like, I don't, there's no hatred in my heart for any of these people. And I kind of approach it from a lighthearted place of analysis and commentary, because none of these people have harmed me. I dislike some of the nastier stuff that John does. It's very frustrating when he gets smug because he's so pleased with himself and has so little right to be. And that's actually frustrating to just watch from the outside. But again, it's not hatred, no. Certainly, I don't wish ill on any of these people. And I'm not saying I'm above taking a little bit of joy in the misfortune of my enemies, but none of these people are my enemies, except in the most abstract of ways that, John hates me for being a Republican. He doesn't hate me personally. He just hates Republicans. So, it's easy to dislike someone who has expressed a lot of hatred for anyone who is not on their side.
Yeah. But you yet is the key word, yet, on the enemies thing. If you stick around in the Dabbleverse long enough, I've already noticed you're starting to get some arrows coming your way a little bit.
I mean,
I don't want to go into detail on that.
Some of it I didn't even understand. There were people making comments, and I'm like, I don't even know who that is. So-and-so is mad at you. Who is that? Like, and I think some of it's trolling. Some of it, too, is not even people in the Dabbleverse. I have, it's a pre-existing condition. I can't get health insurance for it. I have people who don't like me from way back. So I strongly suspect in some cases when I get negative comments that it's just yet another sock puppet for 2 or 3 people that I know just on an ongoing basis dislike me and need to say that.
Right.
I just don't let it bother me. And I think that's why I'm able to bring an attitude of, yeah, that's okay to this whole thing, because 20 and 30 years ago, I was getting grief for my opinions and arguing with people on the internet and getting that out of my system. So, when you've been insulted by people, when you've been insulted by the best, these insults, they hardly measure up.
Yeah, that's true. But back to your rise. So I saw the steel toe, and then I saw your first John. And I think it was a video that had a lot of different things, and Stuttering John was one piece. And then the second video you did was Stuttering John. And I was like, because I'm like you, I started the same way. I have opinions and I consume YouTube all day long, and it's like, I want to be a part of the discussion. So I want to interview this person. This is what I would ask him. So a year later, here I am. But, so I saw you, I think I commented, I subscribed to you, you subscribed to me. And then like in the last week, you went from that to like 1,000 subscribers. You've been on WATP, which is the holy grail of this whole Dabbleverse as far as a show, in my opinion, and most people's opinions. You've been on the Shuley Network BS show. You've been on Casey Armstrong's show. I mean, like Casey, Shuley, and John, to me, have a special place in my heart because they were on a Stern show for so long, So that, to me, that alone is a pretty cool thing. So yeah, man, you went, and I think it's because you brought some sort of intellect and neutrality into the conversation, and other people like Carl, like Shuley, and these people noticed it because you don't get a lot of it, and then I think people just love hearing your takes on this stuff, especially on John.
Well, I don't know how neutral I am. I mean, one guy was like, oh, he tries to be all objective, but he's actually a Shuley super fan. I'm like, no, I just like his show and don't like that show.
That was a poor choice of words for me. Maybe not neutral.
No, not
logical. I'm going to say logical. How's that?
Yeah, I try to give credit where it's due, because I think a person's criticisms hold more weight when they're willing to also give credit to the person they're criticizing for the things that person can do well. I've had people who didn't like my opinions try to come at me and go, well, you're also a terrible writer. And I'm like, that's objectively false. If you can't at least give me credit for the things that I provably can do well and have for years, then your criticisms are not going to hold any weight at all. Mm-hmm. And I think in this realm, it's really hard for some of these people, the people who, again, approach this from a 4th and 5th grade standpoint of, you're not my friend anymore because you said mean things about me. And I think a lot of the drama and a lot of the conflict comes when people who have that attitude come up against somebody who has the other attitude, which is, we're all going to make fun of everybody. That's the business, like that's show business, kid. So I think just being able to objectively give credit, even for people that don't like you and may have even spoken ill of you, that's really all it comes down to. And it's so easy to do that because really none of these people are going to duel each other in the street at the end of the day, no matter how much they claim they're going to. So maybe relax a little bit. Stop treating this like it's the mafia. Stop acting like all of you are going to be in the front yards of all the rest of you. None of you are. And the second one of you does, it's going to be like when, what's that guy's name? Boogie 298 or whatever his name is, who like fired a warning shot at somebody who came to his door. So, there's people take this way too seriously. And I'm not saying,
but that makes it fun. That makes it fun for us.
Yeah, the drama can be fun, and the drama is fun when it doesn't involve, like, we all enjoy drama that doesn't involve us. But I think there comes a point where you just got to go, for the love of God, stop challenging each other to boxing matches. Just stop.
That's stupid. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that's ridiculous.
It's like 2 race car drivers challenging each other to see who can change the tires faster, to see who's the better driver. Like, I'm funnier than you are. Let's box. Like, what would that prove?
Nothing. It just fight in an alley. Why make a spectacle out of it? Yeah, I don't like that aspect of it. But this podcasting, this comedy, this is a battle of wits. And that's the battle that needs to happen. A battle where it's not John screaming over Carl, not Chad doing whatever he's doing. Like, you need a good moderator. I would nominate myself or you to nominate a dabble debate between two key characters that are bipolar opposites in the Dabbleverse.
A debate, if it's going to happen in good faith, has to happen among people of good faith. So, like, you and I could have a debate and we wouldn't be screaming over each other, and that's fine. Shuli and Carl could have a debate. I don't think either one of them would be screaming over the other. John cannot debate anyone because he'll just start screaming and chanting and singing to drown out anything the other person is saying. The only way you could facilitate that, and he would never agree to this, is his microphone would have to be off while it was the other person's turn to talk.
Yeah.
And you would have to switch the mic back and forth while each person took their turn. It's the only way.
That is the only way, but you have to be the alpha in the situation as a moderator or an interviewer. You have to get these guys in line and you tell them you got to take control. You can't let that happen. You know, John, what you said is exactly right, but I noticed when John's on MLC with Kevin Brennan, he's different. Kevin sort of reins him in and keeps him from spazzing out like he does, which is an interesting dynamic.
No one else online can insult John over and over again the way Kevin Brennan does. John, with anyone else, would immediately go to war and would have nothing but bad things to say. And there have been times when he's been mad at Kevin and spoken ill of him, but all it takes is for Kevin to go, all right, you can come back on, and all's forgiven. And I think it's a combination of, I think he looks up to Kevin because I think Kevin represents what he wants to be in terms of his success. And I also think that he desperately wants to work with Kevin. And so he's still holding out hope that one day he'll have that coveted Bob chair that is sitting vacant in his mind. And I think that's why he got so angry when Zumock went back on MLC after those two were on the outs, because he's, again, hands in everybody else's wallet. If Chad is on MLC, that's screen time that I'm not getting. That's rightfully mine.
Right. But now you're getting screen time. Your name's being mentioned on all these podcasts. I want to talk a little bit more about that and how 2-3 months ago you could have never put yourself in a crystal ball and realized you'd be on all these shows the past week. And it's funny. I think it was Sunday night we were DMing each other about the interview and stuff like that. And I said, well, tomorrow's another day in the Dabbleverse. I wonder what's in store. And something along those lines, and you're like, yeah, you never know. And then at the end of the day, I said, when we were chatting this morning, did you think Chad Zumock would be talking about you on MLC and calling you some horrible name?
Well, and that's just it. I even reached out to him on Twitter. I'm like, hey, I know you're not a fan, but thanks for the coverage, because if he's talking about me, it's putting my name out there, to an audience of people who'd never heard of me. Suddenly, everybody, like, when so many people mention your name, even if it's in a negative way, like the what is it? The Obnoxious Bastards podcast, they mentioned my appearance on WATV, and yes, that's it. And it was not kind. They didn't have good things to say, but it's not a bad thing, because suddenly everyone in this universe is hearing my name, and that's driving a portion of them over to the channel, which is all that I want.
Right.
So, you have to be able to approach this with that attitude that if they're talking about you, even if they're yelling and insulting you, they're talking about you. That's a good thing. That's what you want.
It is. And that's how you develop a fan base, and that's how you get subscribers, because this would be a good segue. I want to get into MMA and early UFC, and I want to get into some of the other things outside of the Dabbleverse, self-defense and some of those things. But let's wrap up this Dabbleverse conversation real quick. It changes daily. And having someone talk about you is a good thing. Now, Melton talked about me once, several months ago, and it wasn't very long. He saw me with corn dip, and he said I was boring and weird and all this kind of stuff. But someone messaged me and said, "Hey, Melton's talking about you." And at this point, I didn't really know. I saw him coming on, but I knew who he was, but I didn't stick around a lot and get into his show. But that forced me to like scrum through 4.5 hours trying to find about 30 seconds he devoted to me, to hear him insult me. And I thought it was funny. I didn't think he gave me a chance, honestly, but maybe he did, and he just didn't like it. But the fact of the matter is, everyone in this universe, we're putting our stuff out here, and anyone could critique it any way they want. Chad Zumach, you are open to criticism. Stuttering John, you are open to criticism. You are not immune to criticism because you hit that upload button.
I don't think you understand. I am disabled, and therefore you cannot criticize me because that's hatred.
Yeah. But I tell you what, when I listened to Melton, I have a sense of humor, and it didn't bother me. And then I noticed my views for that video started going up. So I was like, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the game when they're talking about you. Early on, when I started writing martial arts stuff, entire internet forums were devoted to hating me. And that's what helped put my work on the map. Like, I owe those people a lot.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. And my point is because I'm a guy who's into the Dabbleverse. It's not everything I do or like. So I like MMA, and then it's like, oh, I didn't know. I got into you through the Dabbleverse, but now I'm going to consume your other things. Like when you talk about, I like what he talks about here on Stuttering John, so I'm sure I'll like what he'll talk about when it comes to mixed martial arts and self-defense. So it's an avenue for people like us. We have a general channel that touches a lot of different things. Sometimes it touches the Dabbleverse, sometimes it touches true crime, sometimes it touches self-defense. But there's a lot of content there, so we can hopefully get people into us through different avenues that will like our other stuff and build a fan base or build a subscriber base, following.
Hopefully.
So I would definitely implore people to check out your stuff, because you are an author, best-selling author. I would say you're a man's man. I mean, you're making knives, sheaths. You're like,
I don't make knives. I make sheaths for knives as a hobby.
Knives, that's right. But you look like, I mean, you could take care of yourself. You know a ton about self-defense and plenty of different ways about self-defense, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit. It was really unfortunate to see the video. It was Ryan Carson.
Yeah, Ryan Carson. He was killed in New York City at 3:50 in the morning after a wedding because he made a series of mistakes that got him killed. And someone with a little more self-preservation instinct could have avoided those mistakes easily. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are trying to lay the blame at the fact that Carson was a left-wing activist. He was a BLM guy. He was the kind of guy that would not permit himself to stereotype a stranger as dangerous because that would be racist. And as a result, he blundered right into a situation that got him murdered. That's what some people want to put the blame on. I don't see it that way. I really don't see it that way.
I don't either.
I think Ryan Carson simply had no concept of self-defense overall. And so he made certain assumptions, and then when he panicked, it's what got him killed.
Absolutely.
And if people haven't seen the video, if you can find the full video rather than the edited version that's just the beginning and the end, he's sitting on this bench. He and his date get up. There's a guy who has walked past them. He didn't notice them. He's further down the street and he's kicking over scooters. I found you couldn't tell from the video what he was knocking over, but he's enraged and he's doing something. He's kicking something. Well, somebody else told me it was scooters parked on the side of the street.
That's what it was. That's what I read.
So instead of avoiding him, instead of immediately going, this man's going through something, let us go this way, he and his date walk at him. And so Brian is the name of the guy that killed Carson. Brian sees them and just needs an outlet for his anger. So he basically says, back the F up or I'll kill you. And instead, now anyone else with any concept of self-preservation will go, sir, you're absolutely right, and go immediately in the other direction. But unfortunately, Carson, because he was a bigger, taller guy, I think he thought, I can handle this. So he keeps telling him, chill, chill. And he keeps putting his hand on the guy's chest. Now, that's the one thing he did that was a good thing because it was keeping him at arm's length. But at some point, Brian goes for the knife in his pocket. And we see his hand come up and go across Carson's face or neck area. And everything changes in that moment. I think suddenly Carson realized, I'm about to get cut or stabbed. So he turns, and at some point he's about to break into a run. When he does, Brian breaks into a sprint after him, and he's holding the knife as he does it. But unfortunately, Carson has miscalculated, and he hits the bench with all of his weight, goes face down on top of one of those hostile architecture bars that divide the bench up so you can't sleep on it. And I think he was probably unconscious as Brian rolled him off the bench and stabbed him to death.
Hopefully he was unconscious at that point.
It was just, it was brutal. And, people have given the date a lot of grief for standing there, but I think she was either in shock or didn't fully understand how serious this was.
Yeah.
And clearly the woman who approached after saying, I am so sorry. Are you folks okay? Like she was clearly felt responsible for Brian in some way. Well, no, it was comical because I don't think she understood. No, ma'am, this dude's just been stabbed to death.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was obvious.
Did the pool of blood not give it away that he was laying face first down then?
Well, you don't always see that right away. There was a
good point.
There was a video of a slashing that happened in, I want to say it was a mall in Australia, where these two groups of people are giving each other grief. And one guy has a knife in his hand and reaches out and slashes a guy. And there's a moment where you see that guy kind of go, feel like something bad has happened. And then you see the pool of blood form in the floor below him. And so sometimes it can be that subtle, and when in fact someone is dying.
Yeah, that's true. Let me talk a little bit about it, what I saw. Like now, number one, to our listeners, watchers, be careful. Like if you don't want to see someone die, get murdered brutally, like I didn't see the full unedited clip. I saw the one before, after, and then the box over it. That was enough for me. But what I saw was so many mistakes. And I don't think it's fair. Let's just take the politics out of it. Let's take his past out of it. Let's just look at it as two younger people confronting someone who's out of his mind. All right? The scary thing is it could happen to any of us. People are crazy. They have manic. I don't know what this dude, Brian, is that his name? I don't know if he was having a manic episode or he was just an asshole.
He could have been on drugs. He might have had an argument with his girlfriend. He was 18 years old and Carson was in his early 30s.
So number one, when I saw them sitting on the bench, you could tell it's at night, and I'm thinking, okay, you're vulnerable already. Yeah. Your back's to the street. It looks fairly, you could tell it's in the middle of the night. They say nothing good happens after whatever.
Yeah, it was 3:50 a.m. It was almost 4 o'clock in the morning.
Go home. Go home. Get an Uber. Wait for that or whatever. Wait for it to pull up. Then run out the door into the car. Call me paranoid, but
go.
Yeah, I'm a mental survivalist. I'm always thinking of exit strategies. I'm always weary of sitting in restaurants and I hate going to banks. I'm always alert. I'm always aware, and I expect anything out of anybody at any time. Which sounds probably absolutely crazy, especially to people like this guy was probably, who wants to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
So, number one, they're vulnerable. Number two, never walk toward danger. I believe he walked this way. He started a public disturbance, knocking over city equipment, the bikes or whatever. Then they started walking, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but don't they start walking toward him, right?
Yeah, they're walking right at him on the same sidewalk. As if, he's busy attacking scooters, but it'll be fine.
So, number two, always, like to me, my priority is my family, my wife, my kids, and I will jump in front of a bullet or a blade for them. So, number one, my wife would be behind me. I would be shielding her away from this guy or away from the street. True gentlemen walk closer to the curb. But anyway, so that's number one. But you don't walk toward danger. The first thing you avoid danger at all costs. Don't worry about looking like a pussy. Get up, say, we got to go, and disappear. Walk in the opposite direction. You don't walk toward danger, right?
Exactly.
Now, probably giving people the benefit of the doubt, not experienced, and I told you this in a side conversation, the two cities I've lived in, New Orleans and Memphis, are pretty high crime, so I'm used to crime. I've been sort of, your background and where you come up has a lot to do with your survival instincts, and I don't know if this kid had survival instincts at that moment.
No, he had none.
Right. Which is sad. It's sad to see because he didn't stand a chance. But he first thing is just just leave. Don't be there. But sometimes you can't help where you are and when you're there. But you got to walk away from danger. You don't walk into the path. You don't try not to lock eyes with anyone, because I think that's what it was. He says, "What are you?" He didn't like the fact.
He just wanted an outlet for his anger, and these people were convenient. He walked by them and ignored them as if they were the scenery. He wasn't targeting them. It's only when they put himself in his path and his sort of angry glare fixated on them, he's like, oh, look, I can now take out my hostility on this guy. Mm-hmm. And honestly, even when he challenged them, what are you looking at, or whatever it is he said, if that guy had said, I'm so sorry, and just went the other way, he probably would have let him go. He just wanted them to back down. He just needed to feel better about whatever he was furious about. But instead, being challenged, being told, chill by a guy he doesn't know, who is now in his mind resisting him, challenging him. That's, his back is up, and now he's like, well, I got to make this guy submit. I got to make him submit to me. And if that means killing him, fine. Because you can see it in the way he treats. Well, you can see it in the way he treats the woman after the stabbing. Because he goes to leave. He's starting to turn and walk away before that poor man has even finished his death roll on the pavement. And he remembers that she exists. I don't know if she said something or he just remembered. But he turns and he barks at her like this and lunges forward.
Yeah, I would call it he flinched at her. So he tried to get
and then
things to her face, which is horrifying.
Yes. And as if to prove a point, he then kicks the body on the pavement.
I did see
because
that
he's just he barks at her and then he kicks Carson again before walking away. And it's like he couldn't be bothered to kill her. She's just witnessed his crime and he doesn't care.
Well, today he's crying, I noticed, coming out of court with tears. I haven't read up on it. I just saw that.
Yeah, because his life is over.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. I think the kick should get, okay, you might get 60 years, but the kick, you're no parole. You're out.
It's a bad look.
Should be double life.
the kick and the barking at her as if to cement the fact that I'm a very bad man. Yeah. It's going to be really hard for them to defend what he did. Now, also though, it's New York City where they love criminals and hate people who defend themselves. So who knows? Maybe he'll get off with parole.
I want to talk about another based on that But before we get to that, the prank, the YouTuber prank in the mall who got shot. I want to talk about that in a second. But one thing I want to say about this: not everyone is packing. This Ryan dude probably wasn't packing. He didn't have a weapon.
Oh, hell no, not in New York City.
Yeah. So in that situation, if you can't defend yourself with a weapon, you definitely need to run. Or get the hell. You don't want it. Like today, I was riding my bike. Hold that thought real quick. I was riding my bike, and in this area, there's a lot of dogs, pit bulls. There's a lot of dogs that are just loose, and I don't trust them. And if I see them, I stop, and I'm about, in eyes view. I'm like, okay, what do I do in this situation? And what I did was I crossed the street. I went along, and then I came back over. I didn't go toward these dogs. I don't know what they're going to do, So that's just a simple way to think.
Yeah. The problem with running in any of those scenarios is he's not alone. So at some point, after I don't know for sure that he got slashed, but in my head, that's what happened. He got slashed, and that's when things changed for him.
Yeah.
The moment he turned and went to run and hit the bench instead because he miscalculated, she stopped existing for him. The date was no longer anywhere in his mind. And it wasn't that he's a bad man who abandoned his date. It's that his brain was like in fight or flight mode and forgot she existed.
Yeah.
So
I'm not gonna. Yeah, no, I'm
running,
not gonna
like if you're with somebody, like if you run, you don't have any guarantee they're going to take the cue and run with you.
Yeah, running is not the word I should use. I should avoid. You know. You never want to be the center of attention. You never want to get the attention of the assailant. You want, like, in my opinion, I'm not an expert, but I want to blend into the background. I don't want to get eye contact. I just want to kind of disappear.
There's a video of a sidewalk cafe that gets robbed, and there's a guy and a woman sitting at one of the tables. And the second he looks up and sees that there's guys with guns robbing the sidewalk cafe, he just gets up and leaves. And his date is still sitting there going, where did he go? The mistake he made, he did the right thing. He just should have taken her by the arm and taken her with him.
Yeah. Let me just set up this scene. So I don't know if you've noticed these YouTube pranksters. I've been watching YouTube pranks since the beginning. It's gone through many phases. It went through a phase where they're all staged, and you could tell if you're into this kind of stuff. Now it's at a stage of just almost criminal. I mean, it's everyone just trying to do these cringy moments that are just dangerous. And
there was that kid in England who was like home invading people, essentially.
Oh, I never saw that.
Yeah.
But I've noticed. Go ahead.
But there's Johnny Somali in Japan who was running around making trouble and finally got himself arrested.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It's dangerous because if I'm going to the store, I'm not going out to be content for your fucking prank videos. You know what I mean? Like, legal? Yeah. Is it legal for you to film me because I'm in a Walmart or a Walgreens? Yes, it is legal. But at the same time, I'm not looking to be your content, you know? And that's what people are doing. They're using people that are just minding their own business and getting them riled up for content.
In the mall video you were talking about, the guy in the mall, he was legitimately invading that guy's space and putting his phone right up to the guy's head. Like, I'm sorry, but you picked the wrong person to do that to, and they're going to kick the crap out of you.
Okay, let's describe that scene for anyone who hasn't seen it. So it looked like a food court in a mall.
It was exactly a food court.
So fill in the details, but what I do know is they were trying to say this dude either stole something, I don't know, but they were aggressively showing him a phone. And
the phone was just playing nonsense. He was walking up to the guy, and the phone had a loop of audio on it that made no sense, and he was just screwing with him. That's all it was.
But it was aggressive. I mean, invading personal space. Yeah. It was barking.
He was told to stop, and he wouldn't leave him alone.
Yeah, and this guy, who I believe was an Uber Eats driver picking up food, you could see he was kind of like anyone would be. Who is this guy in my face barking? Like, so he was backing up. Now he pulls out a gun and just shoots the guy.
No hesitation. Cold as ice. Just, well, you die now. Bang.
I mean, it was about 5 feet, would you say?
They were very close when he shot.
Yeah. He shot him mid-range somewhere in the chest. Didn't die. The kid didn't die. But
kid's alive.
Yeah. But I was very disappointed. Like, this is my nozredna martial law view, is this guy should not have been charged. This guy should have been let go scot-free. He shouldn't have had to go and put on an orange jumpsuit. What do you think?
I disagree, only because while this was an obnoxious situation and while the guy was very aggressive, at no time did he do anything that actually was imminently threatening this man's life.
We don't know that, though.
Well, the thing is, like, just the body mechanic.
You don't know that.
You don't.
He could have ended up like Ryan Carson.
Yes, but if I walk up to you and I'm holding a phone and I'm putting my phone up by your head, yes, that's aggressive and obnoxious. And if you punched me or slapped me or knocked the phone out of my hand and then kicked my knee out from under me, I would say you're completely justified.
Okay.
But A gun is an off switch for a human being. The second the gun comes into play, it's life or death. And in my opinion, this was not a good shoot because I don't believe that man's life was credibly threatened. Now, yes, was he uncomfortable? Most certainly. But the appropriate thing to do, and I would support this and I would support not charging him, would have been for the gun to come out and him to go, now what do you have to say?
Yeah.
You know, like you're not supposed to draw the gun unless you'd be justified in firing it. I think in that situation, you draw the gun and you make the decision, do I need to shoot? Are you still threatening me? Because a guy that continues to advance on you while you have a gun on him probably does mean you harm.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you just said. And that guy he just like did a one motion where I was just like, wham. That was no.
You could tell there was
like
no thought.
fluid.
He was like, oh, like I'm going to have to kill somebody else today. I've got things to do.
Like they talk about quarterbacks and how many seconds it takes between this guy had he was like, number one in that stat. He went from this
there was no
gunshot and like 0.2 flat.
It was impressive.
But here's my argument. My counter argument is, had this guy not started the situation, there wouldn't be a situation to begin with. Like this guy's life, now this guy's in jail because this idiot was doing a YouTube prank.
Morally, I don't disagree with you, but legally, carrying a gun is carrying the power of life and death. You are required by the law. You are required by the law to absorb an amount of abuse that you would not be required to absorb if you were unarmed. If you're carrying a gun, you're not allowed to be insulted. You can't get angry at someone and escalate a situation because, let's say, they call your wife a whore. Let's say you have a gun and you're out with your wife, and some stranger's like, your wife's a whore. You can't get offended at that and then escalate the situation. Because, let's say you start going back and forth, you start shouting, it escalates. He then pulls a knife out and you shoot him. Well, you just contributed to that situation, So
I think they should.
I think it is
to that. What I'm saying, though,
right? But
the guy was just doing his job, and this situation wouldn't have even arisen.
And that's a powerful argument for lenience. But I don't think the incident rose to the level of imminent grievous bodily harm, which should be the standard for using potentially lethal force. Now, fortunately for everyone, this kid did not die.
That's true.
And I would say the appropriate response would be a slap on the wrist. Like, okay, he's not dead. He's really learned his lesson. You weren't actually in danger of dying, and yet we understand where you're coming from. So I don't know, a couple years probation, something like that. I'd be down with that kind of sentence.
I think that's what he got.
Well, as I understand it, they haven't finished arguing about it yet.
Okay, maybe
he was acquitted of the most serious charge, which was aggravated malicious wounding, and he was convicted on a gun charge, but his lawyer was arguing that was inconsistent with the other acquittal and should be set aside. So in another month, there's going to be another hearing to see if they can set that aside. However, he's not out of the woods yet, because I guarantee you that YouTube guy is going to sue him, because he's going to have a lot of weeks in a hospital bed to think about the fact that there's a bullet in him. And his lawyer will argue that while this guy was obnoxious, shooting him was not justified. So they will sue on those grounds.
Well, if I'm the judge, I'm going back to the beginning. It's the root cause analysis. None of this would have happened. So I would say he should not be able to sue this guy. It's like, let me shoot you because I might be able to let you to shoot me, so I might be able to sue you. It's like suicide.
Well, I agree with you again on moral grounds, but our legal system does not support that.
Yeah. Well, you know what, though? Another part of it is 2023 is different from 2000 even. People are crazier, in my opinion. People are just nuts.
We've become simultaneously more sensitive and more aggressive. It's a bad combination.
Phil, I'm not afraid to say where I'm from. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And I drive on this loop called the 240 loop and 385. It's just basically a loop around the city of Memphis. There's so it's the main artery to get to whatever part of the city of Memphis you have to get to. Every day people are shooting each other on this thing.
Wow.
I mean, I can source it. Just look up 240 loop Memphis shootings, and there's probably a good couple a week. People just cap just because they got cut off. Boom, boom. Road rage, just lawlessness. It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. So the point is, people are more prone to kill you these days than they would beat you up. So, being a little trigger happy or a little bit holster happy in this day and age, in this year where we are now, is a little bit different than it was,
Well, and you can do everything right and still have your life ruined in court. It's a very dangerous prospect, no matter how you look at it. It's very important you do everything absolutely right so that you have the best possible chance of being acquitted when you inevitably end up going to trial to defend your actions.
Well, isn't the golden rule still you have to say you felt like your life was in danger?
No, actually,
prove that.
I talked about that in a book that I just published. Actually, I published a book called "People Who Carry Tactical Pens Can't Fight and Other Dumb Things People Say About Self-Defense." I know it just rolls off the tongue, but in the book I talk about many dumb things that I've heard people say about self-defense, and over relying on that concept is one of those things. There are people who believe that saying "I was in fear for my life" is this magic get out of jail free card, and it's really not. It's not enough. There are certain legal thresholds that have to be met for, to meet that reasonable man standard of self-defense. So it's extremely important that you conduct yourself the way a theoretical, reasonable person would, and that you be in imminent danger before you take potentially lethal action.
Yeah.
And there's other concepts that come into play, like parity of force, which is that our legal system generally will allow you to use as much force as being used on you and just a little bit more than that to win. Mm-hmm. But anything over that, you could conceivably get into a great deal of trouble.
Yeah. I mean, drawing your gun should be an absolute last resort. I'm not a big fan. I troll a little bit when I'm joking a little bit, not completely about my views on the law and that aspect of it, but for the most part, yeah, drawing your gun is an absolute last resort. Absolutely. I mean, that's the number one rule in a way.
I don't know if it's still up, but over at warriorlife.com, which is an outfit that I used to work with, they had a video quiz that was a series of shoot, don't shoot decisions. Like they'd put you in a video scenario of two guys coming at you in a parking lot, and then the video stops and they're like, "So what do you do here? Do you draw your gun? Do you shoot them? Do you do nothing?" And then you go through the whole quiz, and at the end you find out like various situations where if you didn't do anything at this point, you're probably dead. If you did something at this point, you're probably going to jail because it was too early, stuff like that. I think all of us could benefit from gaming through those scenarios and learning what the actual law says, because there is tremendous ignorance in our society about what the law says about self-defense and then about the practical facts of self-defense, as Ryan Carson's death shows. So we have a big problem in that everyone talks about self-defense and violent crime and what you should or shouldn't have done and what you should be allowed to do, and almost none of them have the slightest clue how it's done or what the law says about how it's done. And that ignorance is dangerous.
Yeah. That ignorance permeates many aspects of other issues as well, not just
it does
this. I mean, ignorance is a big part of a lot of these downfalls. I'm in Tennessee. We don't even we have, like last year or maybe the year before, it went from you had to go to a gun store to get your permit, and they kind of called it, I think, a concealed weapons permit, but it was really not that. It was just a license to carry.
Well, you have constitutional carry now, do you?
Yes, that's what I was getting at, and that's a big debate. Then we went to an intimate, I think your domain, like it considered your car and your home your domain. So you can take it from your car to your house back and forth. So in other words, you could drive around with it and not have a permit. So it went into that stage, and now it's constitutional. It's like, no permit needed.
People forget that Vermont had that system for many, many years, that you didn't need any kind of special permit to carry a gun. And the fact is that gun owners, statistically, legal gun owners commit less crime than the population at large. So, the people who would throw up their hands and go, "It's going to be blood in the streets and it's going to be anarchy if you let people." The fact is, when guns are legal to carry, only a relatively small percentage of the population even takes advantage of that. Most people are not gun-minded people, even though we have this image of Americans as a bunch of rootin' tootin' cowboys who are all armed to the max. It's only a small percentage of them who are actually, so they say there's there's 300 million guns in the United States. There's enough for one for every person, or maybe there's even more than that. But it's because the guys who do own guns own 50 of them, not because 300 million Americans own one.
There you go. Yeah, very few people just own one.
Yeah, I don't know a single gun guy who's like, no, I just got the one, except for maybe Vince. I think he said he owned a Glock and that was it.
Huh. Hey, you look like you're probably the age of the arcade, coming up in arcades, right? Pinball machines, and then the arcade, the quarter slot video games and stuff.
Yeah.
Remember when you were talking about that training? Remember when they started having the stand-up gun games? And
oh yeah, what was the one? It was Operation Wolf, which had the Uzis. Oh my God. Oh, I love that game so much.
But I like the handguns too. But I mean, you would be in real situations like you know where an assailant will come out with a woman and you might shoot the hostage. I mean, it's amazing in that game, like how intense, how that was great training just playing that video game. And then they got better and better, and they got Uzis but the first ones were so good, and they were in all these. It's basically what you're saying, and
my favorite arcade game of all time was a game called Silent Scope, which was a sniper game that had that rifle stuck right to the front of the arcade thing. Oh, it was so much fun.
The coolest thing was Duck Hunt that came with the first Nintendo. Remember?
Oh yeah,
that was kind of revolutionary. I mean,
we've all tried to shoot that dog.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean that was really revolutionary. Yeah, the fun arcade, I call them the fun arcades, but yeah, the arcades were such a part of our youth. Growing up in the 80s, and 90s, arcades. Like I have a brother that's about 18 years older than me. He came up on pinball machines, and he's so good at pinball machines. I don't know. It's like he's just amazing. He can make one quarter last forever, and I'm terrible. I mean, pinball, I can make a quarter last in about 2 minutes.
My father and I used to play Super Mario Brothers on the original Nintendo, and we both got so good at it that you pretty much had to wait for one guy to work his way through the whole game before it was your turn.
I just got, I have young kids and as well, and I just got, my wife and I saw it's the original Nintendo, but it's a replica, but it's a mini one.
Yeah, they've got the games built in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a code, it's like someone just put in this code and there's a bunch of typos and stuff. It's really poorly done. The interface is terrible, but the games are exact. My kids are playing Super Mario, the original OG Super Mario Brothers. It's so fun. It is so fun. I've been playing Donkey Kong Jr.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of different systems on which I can play Contra, which was my favorite game from back then.
Yes.
But the one game I've never been able to get that simply just isn't available on any of these emulator systems that are falling out of trees anymore is the original Bushido blade for the original PlayStation. Never been able to find that one, and that's a sore spot with me. I love that game.
So if someone has it, it's probably really rare and worth a lot of money, or is it just...
Well, no, it's just that for whatever reason, you can buy from China a thing that looks like a Nintendo Game Boy that's loaded with all kinds of 8-bit and more games. But the one game I have not been able to see, I've checked on many of these systems and I bought a few, and that Bushido blade one is just one that's not available. Don't know why.
Wow. Yeah. I check out a lot of used, I still play some old systems. I still play Sega and, it's how it is when you get older. You still play the games you grew up on. But I remember when Atari 2600 came out, that was such a big deal. I mean, my favorite game for that game was Demon Attack, which was, I want to say it was an Intellivision or Activision, something like that. It was Activision.
There's Atari. Yeah, it was an Activision cartridge.
Activision made cartridges for.
Yeah. Demon Attack was such a great game. It was kind of like a more advanced Space Invaders, and I spent hours playing that game.
Yeah, they were. I mean, looking back, the games were absolutely terrible. But
Well,
I mean,
graphically they weren't advanced, but the ones that really hit were the ones that were fun to play because the mechanic just pulled you in. I mean, visually, Tetris is not that big a deal, but the mechanics of it, you see those shapes in your head after a while.
Yeah.
You know, when you get really good and addicted to Tetris, you'll just be minding your own business and you'll start to see the shapes.
Yep. Like with that Tetris I have a lot of where they come with the auxiliary plug, the audio and the video, and you just plug it directly into your old TV and it comes with a joystick. And these games are exactly like the originals. And I have a Tetris one. The first game Atari 2600 came with was Pong. Remember it had like the rotating.
Yeah, because the console came with the paddles and the joysticks, and Pong was one of the games that just came with the system.
Yeah.
So everybody played it because before you built up a library, that's what you had.
Yeah. It came with it. And I think there was another one, wasn't it like Indy 500 or something like that?
Something like that. There was a racing game. The only other paddle game that I played a lot was called Warlords, which was a breakout style game where there was a castle in each corner of the screen. And I got so good at Warlords that my father would not play it against me because I won every time.
I would get blisters from playing Warlords.
Yeah. Such a great game.
I have that, right?
And we've all played a little brother or little sister in Outlaw.
Yeah.
With the stick figure cowboys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little brother.
Oh, the memories.
And then,
And the horrible version of Pac-Man that the Atari came with, which it bore no resemblance except in concept to the arcade game. It had its own sounds, its own look and feel. But boy, I played the hell out of that game.
Yeah, I did too. Now, because it was the fact that we're even doing anything remotely like a video game in our home, it was a big deal, no matter how much it sucked. When Pac-Man came out, that was like a craze. Like people were lining up to get that Atari cartridge, and it was
right about that same time was when those little LED tabletop consoles came out.
Yeah.
So they were like LED simulations of the games that graphically were not as advanced, but by goodness, you could put one on a cafeteria table and be playing something that was sort of like Space Invaders.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. My brother, I was telling you about the pinball one. We went up to St. Louis, which is not a far drive from not too long, but they had a retro arcade and it had a lot of the original games that we played, and it was like God placed it there. We're just walking along and was like, there it was. We're like, you got to be kidding me. And we had a great time. That was fun.
Good deal.
Last thing I want to talk about, we'll wrap it up. I want to talk about the UFC. Going back, I remember UFC 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to talk about the first ones. Are you cool with talking about that? I didn't prep you much.
I watched those on VHS from Blockbuster.
So I thought you probably did, and that's what I want to talk about. Those first 5 were so fascinating, and I used to go rent them as well and get them on VHS tapes from Blockbuster or the local place. And that's the only way you'd see them, because pay-per-view really wasn't around yet. It was right before pay-per-view started.
Well, I don't know how they were originally broadcast. I think they might have been pay-per-view when they originally were on. The only way to watch them after the fact was to rent them.
Yeah.
And I remember that one fight between, was his name Hackathorn, the guy that broke his hand trying to knock out the big sumo dude. And he, this was before there were time limits, and I can't remember if they were wearing gloves at all or if it was still bare knuckles. But
no rules.
He couldn't end the fight.
Weight limits.
Right. So as long as the guy didn't tap and he couldn't knock him out, he couldn't make the fight stop. So he ended up breaking his hand, and then back then these guys would do multiple matches in the same day, and he was not able to. Right, he was not able to move on and fight anybody else because he broke his hand.
Mm-hmm. And that's what ruined them. That's what ruined it. That's what ruined that format, because then you'd have a guy in the finals that never fought. That was just like a fill-in. And one guy actually won once. He actually won like UFC 6 or something. He was like I believe it was a cop or something, and he was a fill-in and got lucky twice and won it.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to watch. It's changed. The sport has changed so much now, and I want to talk about that evolution real quick. But those first ones, the uniqueness was the fact that you got to see different styles. You got to see karate. You got to see, I mean, in my opinion, how worthless Taekwondo is.
Well, nobody had any idea how to fight each other. So you put these guys in and like they know how to fight somebody who does what they do, but they have no idea how to fight somebody who doesn't do what they do because that guy doesn't know the rules. Exactly. So it was this glorious mess where they're like, well, I guess we're fighting now. And it would just be chaos. And then the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys started dominating because in that one-on-one format, of course they did, because they're fighting, in many cases, people who had no ground fighting ability at all, had never done it in any way. So, you go up against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt and you've never learned anything about the ground. Of course you lose immediately.
That's what was so fascinating with it. Royce Gracie, whatever.
Royce,
he won the first two, I think, and he basically made it through the tournament bracket. I don't even think anyone scratched him.
Right, he was just submitting people
like an anaconda. To me, like when I saw that, and I started watching these different styles fight. To me, like my dad was really into judo. Like I have his black belt over here. Like he was a real deal. Came up in the 60s with these real hardcore judo guys and dojos. But anyway, I thought judo was a pretty good form. But for the most part, all fights, as they say, end up on the ground. Wrestling and jiu-jitsu is the best, in my opinion, in survival, and all of it is the best form. Get it on the ground, when you see these guys choke out assailants, and why absorb a punch if you don't have to? Now it's like these guys get in a ring and they just punch each other until one of them gets them on the ground.
Well, I remember thinking in those early UFCs that the grappling stuff was boring to watch because essentially it's one person lying on top of another until that person submits. It's much more interesting to watch people of different striking styles not know what to do with each other and end up beating the hell out of each other. That's way more fun to watch.
It is. It's without a doubt. No, but as far as survival goes,
right? And to me, you have to make that dividing line between here's what we do with sports and here's what we do in real life, because you will never run out of search results if you put in to Google MMA practitioner killed. Like MMA guys go out on the street and get murdered by people with screwdrivers all the time. It happens because people get murdered on the street all the time. And so, it's one thing to, you pull off this beautiful, perfect armbar in the UFC. That's one kind of fighting. But then you've got this 18-year-old piece of garbage with a knife in his pocket who stabs you to death because he tripped on a bench. Very different worlds. And so I think real life self-defense is much closer to that second scenario where there's certainly your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or your mixed martial arts would be of use, but isn't necessarily the solution in a situation where, I could trip on a bench and die while the guy stabs me to death. A situation that none of your training prepared you for up to that point, because it was just never came up.
No. And we'll end it on this. We'll circle back to the Dabbleverse and these so-called boxing matches. But what these guys don't realize that, and I did talk to Aaron a little bit about this, there's an adrenaline dump. And if you've never experienced an adrenaline dump, that's going to be your first problem.
Yeah, that feeling of why are my balls crawling back up into my abdomen?
Yes, and why do my muscles feel like rubber? I can't do anything.
Yeah,
it's like I feel weak all over.
Yeah, you got no fine motor control.
Yeah, the adrenaline dump and endurance is really important. Those two things, but very few people can control the adrenaline, the shock, and that adrenaline dump. That's something that you never know how people are going to react. Like you mentioned that the girlfriend, like, yeah, I think she was probably in shock. And I think sometimes we judge people seeing these videos and we don't realize they're probably in shock.
Yeah. Well, it's a natural reaction for the brain to lock up when it sees something it's not prepared to process. So if you've never gamed this situation out in your head, your brain is like, huh? Like it's a common, you see this, you'll be out in public and like an old lady will fall down and everyone around her will freeze and look at her until the first person realizes I should help. And then the second that first person goes to help, other people are like, oh yes, that's what you do. It's because their brains simply haven't been able to yet lock on to what's happening. It's one of the reasons that visualization exercises are so powerful, because they help you game out situations so that your brain has something to go, I've thought about this. This is what you do in that situation. You know, when I've taken classes on what's called managing unknown contacts, which is how you deal with somebody who's approaching you, who you don't want to approach you. Ooh. And so when it happened to me for real and somebody was trying to mug me, my brain was like, hey buddy, you got a script for this. Just use that. So I did, and it worked.
Ooh, tell me about it. Can you?
Well, I did actually did a podcast. It's a video that's on my martial arts channel where I talked about 3 real life situations. And in this case, my girlfriend and I were walking out of a bookstore and a guy came up to us and did the, excuse me, sir. And anybody, you living in a big city, you know,
the worst 2 words.
Excuse me, sir. Nothing good ever comes after that.
No.
So I immediately short circuited him and I said, no, thank you. I don't want any. And he got mad, and I don't want to rehash the whole story, but basically he started yelling and shouting at me and trying to get me to re-engage with him because he wanted an excuse to close distance with me again. And I messed up his plan by not following his script, because your average person who wants to mug you, they have a script in their head that they execute. They practice that script by doing it and assaulting people. And I absolutely am convinced that had I let him go through that, that scenario would have ended with him trying to assault us and mug us. He got so angry when I wouldn't let him go through his script and was, like he was shouting his address, or what he said was his address. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm supposed to make an appointment for an ass kicking later. He was shouting racist things, trying to get me to rise to the bait of being called a racist. And honestly, when we got in our car and drove away, I thought maybe he would try to either throw something at the car or get in the way. But all I did was follow the script that they teach you when it comes to managing unknown contacts, which is, you put your hands up, you say, no, thank you. If they get loud, you get louder, not because you're trying to be a tough guy, but because they don't hear you unless you're swearing at them. Back up, back the fuck up. They just don't process it until you start throwing F-bombs in there. And then if he continues to close with you, if he gets to the point where he's in range, you are obligated to preemptively strike him. Thank God it didn't get to that point, because I don't know this guy. I don't want to touch this guy. He could have a knife. I don't want to end up stabbed to death in a parking lot. So, the script that they gave us is one that works. I've used it more than once. There was one time walking out of a movie theater late at night when a couple of guys were definitely following us and there were no other cars around but mine. So they weren't going to their car. And I'm like, okay, here it is. So I stopped, and the people I was with never knew this happened. They just kept going. And I took my knife and I snapped it open and I put it in a reverse grip and I got ready. Like, okay. And I'm running through my mind, here's what I have to do. And I don't know if I don't think they could see the knife because it was dark and they were still far enough away, but they took a right turn and walked at a 90-degree angle. And I think it's because they saw me watching them and aware of their approach.
Yeah.
So, all of my real life self-defense situations, you could say, oh, that's all in your head. I don't think it was. I think if I hadn't done what I did, then something very bad would have happened. But on the Martial Arts Podcast with Phil Elmore is the martial arts channel that I have. And I did an entire podcast on these 3 real life self-defense incidents because those are the ones I have.
I'm going to put those in the description. Because I'm really into watching a lot of videos like that. And one I just saw this week, and we'll wrap it up, is eye contact. What's your thoughts on eye contact?
I think when you're moving around in a mixed people setting, What you do is fix your gaze on something that way, past the people that you're walking by. Most people, if they see you focused on something beyond them, like, okay, I've got to go there. That's very important to me. I'm going there. They tend to not notice you.
Oh,
You're not
expert at that.
And you just kind of, you might nod or acknowledge them as you go by, but you're like, hey, buddy, how's it going? But I'm going there.
Yeah.
That thing that you can't see, I'm really fixed on.
Yeah.
And, it's almost George Costanza your way through. Yeah. Because
arms people.
Well, because your focus is on something that isn't them. And most people are fundamentally self-centered. And so if they think, okay, he's not challenging me and he's not focused on me, he's aware that I'm there, which you want them to know that you're not oblivious to them. But it's like, hey, I know you're there, but I've got to be there, whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, where you're there, quick contact. But what about like when someone's threatening and sort of like almost chest to chest, or they're maybe 5 feet away from you, but they're just fixated on you, and it's like
when someone is approaching you like that, that's when you do that managing unknown context thing. You don't let somebody get chest to chest with you, because that with the second he's that close, he's going to hurt you. And your only option when someone starts to get that close with you is to do something that they can't see, like a strike that comes up from under the eye line, like a good old World War II chin jab that comes up under their chin and snaps them back, something like that they don't necessarily see coming, because they'll see this coming. They'll see your shoulder movement. But if you come from underneath, if they're already that close, then that can work.
Yeah. Most people are all bark and no bite, I find. But you still have to be ready.
I saw that happen once. I was in a parking lot. I was waiting for somebody. I'm sitting in my car with the window down. A guy, a pickup truck passed too close to some dude who was walking. So he got mad and he slapped the side of the truck. And the truck lurches to a stop and the guy gets out and the two of them start shouting at each other. You never saw two people who wanted to fight less than these two guys, but each one of them wanted the other one to back down. So I'm just watching this. I'm like, this is hilarious. Neither one of you wants to fight the other.
I'm at the point now where I don't even honk at anybody. I don't care what they do, as long as they didn't wreck me. I mean, honking these days can get you killed.
I think that's the sort of the maturity that comes with age when it comes to being behind the wheel. I'm just like, I just want to get where I'm going. I don't want any drama.
Hey, Adam, title this episode, Honking Can Get You Killed These Days. Sorry, that's... Phil, it's been fun. We talked everything I wanted to talk about. We talked about it. Couldn't have been any better. I enjoyed it. Loved it. I want people to definitely check out your Dabbleverse stuff. I'm interested in your Dabbleverse stuff, but I think what I'm interested in is way beyond the Dabbleverse, the other things you're doing. Anything you want to say before we leave? I know I'll get those links from you.
Well, I think if our martial arts conversation was of interest to you, my book, People Who Carry Tactical Pens Can't Fight, would be a fun book to read. That's on Amazon in Kindle and paperback.
Awesome. Good deal. I'll put that in the description as well. It's been a blast. I hope I talk to you again sometime.
Absolutely.
Let's keep in touch, and we'll compare notes on the ongoings in the Dabbleverse.
Absolutely. All right, man.
All right. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.